My name is Catherine and I am a recovering English teacher. I actually left teaching twice, once by accident and once on purpose, but that is a story I'll have to tell in another video. I now make content on social media about language, literature and culture. This is a new channel. All my other content is on TikTok, so thank you if you join me from there. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and explain what kind of content you can expect from me on here. When I talk to people about their experiences studying English at school, it's usually quite a binary reaction. There are the people who say they loved it, they miss it, they wish they could study it still. And there are people who say they hated it, they were bored. Why did they have to study these old texts that feel irrelevant to them today? And my aim with this channel is for people to come away from it feeling either nostalgic and reconnected with the subject that they miss, or to heal people's relationship with the subject that they found dull, maybe inspire them to pick up a book, write their own ideas down, or just take pleasure and enjoyment in the language around them. I'm English and I have taught and worked in UK schools, so my content will largely relate to the English language and English literature. However, I love reading texts in translation and I will also talk about those. And also, I think that whatever country you come from, whatever language you speak, it's pretty much universal that you will have studied the literature of your culture and the language of your culture. So if you are interested in stories, in fiction, and in language and words and the history of words, I hope you'll enjoy my page, even if English is not your first language. I'm now going to outline the kind of core principles or guiding ideas behind my page, which will be kind of a recurring theme and underpin my content. Number one is my belief that learning new words is one of the cheapest sources of dopamine available to human beings. So whether we are reviving underused old words or exploring new coinages that have come from the digital age or getting into etymological deep dives, I will be talking about words a lot on my page and taking a lot of enjoyment from them. Guiding principle number two is that perfection is the enemy of creativity. And in my content, I hope to embody that as well as preach it. Now, there are some professions in which perfection is very important. If you are a heart surgeon, you need to make the incision in just the right place. If you're sending people into space, I hope you've done the correct, perfect calculations about how much fuel you're going to need and how much oxygen they'll need while they're up there. But when it comes to talking about literature, when it comes to discussing a poem, we are allowed to think what we think, even if it is not necessarily correct or the same as what other people think. And I'll tell a little anecdote about how perfection really held me back. In fact, I've got so many anecdotes about that, but here's an example. A few years ago, I read a novel that was actually an adaptation or a retelling of a Shakespeare play. And I'm not going to name it because this will be too identifying for the person I'm going to talk about. But not very many people have read this novel and I really like it. So I looked up podcasts about it to see if I could find anyone speaking about it. And I found a podcast where someone had made a whole episode about this book. And it was a kind of literary podcast where this presenter talks about books they like. And I listened to it and I was kind of enjoying it. And then after a certain amount of time, it dawned on me that the presenter of the podcast didn't understand or didn't know that this novel she was talking about was the retelling of a Shakespeare play. That just had not, I don't know how she missed it because it's on the blurb of the book. But anyway, for whatever reason, she had not. But it was still a really interesting episode because she was articulating her opinions about the characters, the structure, all the things she thought about this book. And the scales kind of fell from my eyes. And I was like, I've enjoyed this podcast. Now, from where I'm standing as someone who knows a lot about Shakespeare, it's like, oh my God, it's how embarrassing that you didn't know that. But actually, who was the real winner here? Like me, who knew the thing but hadn't made any content about it, or her, who had read this book, digested it, and given her views to the world. And one of the things that's held me back at times in making content about literature, for example, is that, if I'm going to make a video about James Joyce, well, I'm not an expert on James Joyce. I've just read a few of his books when I was at university 20 years ago. And so I worry that if I make a video about James Joyce, someone who's an expert on James Joyce will see it, realize that I don't know that much about it and think, what an idiot she is. But now I just think, well, that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to talk about what I think. And if that ever did happen, my unlikely imagined scenario about an expert seeing my content and thinking I'm an idiot because I don't know everything, I think that's A, incredibly unlikely. B, if it happened, would say more about them than it is about me. And C, if an expert on some kind of understudied or not in fashion area of literature comes across someone else talking about it, even if that person is making mistakes or is not particularly well informed, they'll probably just be jumping for joy that people are taking an interest in their niche area. People who follow me on TikTok have been telling me for ages that they think I should make content on YouTube, and I've been meaning to do so, but the thing that's been holding me back is perfectionism. So anyway, one thing I do on TikTok, and I plan to do it here as well, is I write timed essays. I will record myself under timed conditions writing an essay in 45 minutes, and then I will share the results. And I think that is a really good way to force yourself to be an anti-perfectionist, to be spontaneously creative under a time constraint, and just see what can come from your brain in that time without looking anything up, certainly without using any AI. That's another thing I am an enemy of. I object to the use of AI in creativity in most circumstances, not necessarily all. And I think that the discipline of the timed essay, forcing yourself to have your own opinions and rely on your own wits in under time circumstances without recourse to any external information, is a skill that's going to be important to fight to maintain in the age where there is so much information and a relentless drive for people to perfect their writing. You know, people are so worried about making their writing perfect now that they'll put their emails through an LLM to make them seem better. I would rather receive an email containing imperfections, repetitions, grammatical errors, and know that it was from a person than to receive a kind of bland chat GPT digest of what they wanted to say in the first place. And my last point, which I've actually kind of covered a bit when my rant about perfectionism, is that my manifesto is to make essays fun again. You don't have to be an expert on something to know the most about it to write an essay about it. I think the way we teach essays in schools, certainly in schools in the UK, is very deadening and really stifles people's enjoyment of the form, because by and large they tend to be taught in a very formulaic way, like make your point, use your evidence, analyse the language of the evidence you've used from the literary text. It creates this illusion in children's minds that there is a correct way to write an essay, where there certainly is not. And it takes us away from the point of an essay. You know, the word essay comes from the French word to try. An essay is an attempt, an exploration, a kind of like playground of ideas where you explain what you think and substantiate it. Wow, I've got a bit carried away now. I was quite nervous when I started making the video, probably that shows, but due to my anti-perfectionism commitment, I am not going to go back and re-edit it a million times because I just don't have time. I have to go and pick up my children from school soon. So I'm just going to be real, as they say, and like reveal myself in all my imperfections, because that is what makes us human and not artificial. Some of the things I plan to get up to on here are, I want to do a Succession rewatch where I do deep dives into all the literary and cultural references in Succession. That will be my like niche angle in the deep dive. I want to interview other people, particularly content creators who use language in interesting ways. Since I started making content, I've actually become friends with a lot of other content creators. And often the people I follow and the people I find interesting, it's due to the way they speak, the words they use, and because they all have a very distinctive flair in their communication. And I always wonder, you know, as a teacher, I always wonder to myself in each of the cases, like, did this person really like English at school? Were they a superstar? Like class clown? Were they performing? Did they love English? Or were they someone who found English boring, was kind of like just getting through it, and their love of language and their ability to perform is something that flourished later? And another thing I often say is never skip a Shakespeare day. So you can expect, if you follow me, to see lots of references to Shakespeare and lots of references to Charles Dickens, because God help me, I love those dead white men. But I also like women writers, modern writers, writers of colour, writers from all over the world. So don't worry, it is not going to be a cultural monolith. Thank you for staying with me throughout this imperfect video. If you are interested in anything I've been talking about, please do save this or give me a follow. And I love getting to know people on different platforms. I love interacting with people on TikTok. So if you want to say hi in the comments, ask a question, tell me something, I will be happy to chat to you there.